The 1980 Henley Regatta, a women's 8-oared race, was introduced for the first time. The men's lightweight 8 won the Grand Challenge Cup for the second year in a row. Cup crew rode a demonstration course. In the 5.5 mile head of the Yarra, MUBC entered 5/8. The lightweight 8 won the open event, and the MUBC veteran number 2 crew won the veterans event. The Youth 8, with 5 rowers, Cox and coach from MUBC, competed by invitation. This was the second year running that MUBC won the Open and Veteran events. The men's lightweight 4-oared titles eluded MUBC at the Nationals and Interstate Regatta held on Lake Wendouree between March the 12th and 16th. The women's events were dominated by the Melbourne University Dimboola crew of Sue Palfreyman Cox, Sally Harding Stroke, Pam Westendorf, Verna Westwood, Anne Churnside Bow and Dave Palfreyman coach. The ruthless combination of four single scullers, Mackenzie, Rigby, Cassidy and Cooper, coached by Dave Yates, gave MUBC its first quad sculls title. The MUBC Lightweight 8 won their third successive national title, this year being coached by Rob Stewart, and subsequently Simon Gillett, Phil Gardner and Charlie Bartlett were selected in the Australian lightweight team for Belgium. The Elite Four joined Barbara Griffiths, Gwenda Bennett, Margot Foster and Virginia Credible to win the women's 8-oared title easily. The Victorian Elite Four are the first women rowers to be selected to compete in the Olympics. The women's lightweight 4 is also won by Victoria, gaining selection for Barbara Griffiths and Gwenda Bennett in the Australian lightweight 4 to compete in the Canadian Henley, and the Victorian Youth 8, coached by Ag Mitchellmore, with assistance from Jeff Rees, clinches the Noel F. Wilkinson Trophy. The King's Cup is retained by Victoria, and Jim Lowe and Dave England gained selection in the Olympic 8. College wins the men's and women's intercollegiate boat race. Three Melbourne University boats, all made by Jeff Sykes, are christened, including the Alec McLeish, which carried Colin Smith, Jeff Rees, Ag Mitchell-Moore and Campbell Johnson to a gold medal at Lucerne in 1974. Peg Philp christened the Racing 8 the Peter Philp. The Copenhagen 78, a coxless 4, was christened by Mrs. Jean Rees. And the Alec McLeish was christened by Mrs. Dorothy McLeish. Following the Inter-Varsity time trial, the 1974 world champion coxless lightweight 4 had a reunion paddle. This was the sort of inspiring rowing needed for the decimation to follow in the national capital by the Inter-Varsity team in Canberra.
We were at a party. Here was telling the game. Someone reached in and grabbed it. What's wrong? Lost the job.
women's 8, with 5 members from the winning Trinity Cruise, was seated from bow Lindsay McKendrick, Julie Cathcart, Annie Rowland, Zania Boynton, Margie Gillespie, Sarah Pizzi, Sarah Seacombe, stroke Margot Foster, Cox Kerry Wilcock, and coach Michael Nicholson. The women's lightweight 4 was coached by Peter Gibson and coxed by Vivian Corcoran. The women's coxless pair and sculler came out of the heavyweight 4, and the 2 4s combined to make the 8. They did some work with the men's lightweight 4. On Wednesday evening, the men's lightweight coach, Burley, arrived. The lightweight 4 was seated from bow Bryce Rayworth, Jim Peters, Roger Bade, Mike Keeley stroke, Dave Fisher Cox and Tim McCoy assistant coach. And on Thursday the sculler and pair arrived. The men's 8 was seated bow Tony Inglis, 2 Steve Weir, 3 Richard Hall, 4 Mark Reedy, 5 Mark Carnegie, 6 Paul Reedy, 7 Rob Kvant, stroke Noel McConkey, Cox Eric Nelson, coach and men's team manager Adrian McGinn. On Friday, only the men had heats in the lightweight 4, pair and 8. The men's coxless pair was seated bow Tony Hall, stroke John McKenzie and coach Dave Yates. three crews recorded the fastest times in the heats. On Saturday morning, the women's fours and pair were towed over to the course, and the women's eight rowed their boat. The course was about a mile and a half from the Australian National University's boat shed. Stroke 7 and 3 of the women's eight had 3 1,000 metre races to compete in, and the rest of the crew had 2 races. The men's course was over 1,800 metres, starting in front of the Governor-General's house. In the first event of the day, the women's coxless pairs, Melbourne crabbed and Latrobe won. However, Andrew Cassidy quickly put Melbourne back on its feet, winning by 49.7 seconds in the men's sculls. In the women's eight, Melbourne, the title holders on this side, moves to a length lead over ANU in the first 500 metres and stays there. Melbourne finishes 3.9 seconds in front of ANU. In the men's lightweight four, Melbourne, on the worst station, wins by 10.2 seconds from ANU and Queensland. In the women's scull, Annie Rowland, who climbed into a scull for the first time 3 weeks before the race, comes in third. Dave Yates coached both Melbourne scullers. The Mackenzie Hall combination hold off an honest Western Australian coxless pair to win by 7.2 seconds. And in the women's Open 4, Melbourne wins back the Lady Margaret Cup, defeating Monash by 8 seconds, with Sydney third. In the Oxford and Cambridge Cup, Melbourne, on the far station, moves through the field at the 1,000 metre mark and crosses the finish line at 41, 1.9 seconds ahead of Sydney, with Queensland 0.5 seconds further back in third position. The crew had an average weight of 13 stone 3 pounds, average height of 6'2" and average age of 17. Final event of the day, Melbourne on this side won the women's lightweight 4 by 1.5 lengths from ANU.